here in our own consciousness. Whatever it is that we need, want, or whatever our purpose is, or whatever we're here for is an inner experience. It's an awakening. It's not some piece of information. It's that moment when we connect with the greater good, the greater energy, with Spirit, with God. So the challenge is that when we make that connection, there's a lot of Herods. And Herod sort of represents anybody that discounts who it is that you are, anybody that is threatened by whatever awakening that occurs in your life. You know, I remember when I first grasped the idea in 1972, I walked into a Unity church, and Scott Sherman was the minister, and he said that there's a spark of divinity in you, and I grasped that idea. And, you know, it reaffirmed what I already knew, but hadn't ever really put into a structure or put into words. And so I went out and grabbed everybody and drug them to church and went and tried to tell my parents and everybody. You know how you have that, and here I'm 23 years old, and you have that surge of, you know, if it's in me, it's in everybody, and I want to make sure everybody knows it, and you know, that whole kind of evangelistic sort of dynamic that shows up. Well, people don't necessarily respond to that very well. They don't respond to your awakening very well because it's threatening. It's a shift in the consciousness of whatever environment that you're in. And so that there's a lot of Herods around us. And it's not that they're bad or anything, it's just, you know, when we recognize that, we realize that we're probably not going to get the kind of feedback that we would like to get when we're telling Herod that there's another king. And it's not you. It's something else that's showing up. And so that dynamic shows up. But there's also a lot of inner Herods. And the inner Herods is that I'm not good enough, that I'm not worthy, that I'm less than, that this can't be true, that, you know, on and on and on. All the stuff that discounts that experience, or that we try to talk ourselves out of it, or it's difficult for us to acknowledge it. So we have to deal with the inner Herods in order to deal with the outer Herods. So we have to take time to look within and get comfortable and to work with those issues that show up in our life experience. Now, the wise men found Jesus, and they gave him gifts, and then they left. Now I'm not saying that unity as a religion, as a structure, has all the answers. In fact, we probably don't have all the answers. That because, just as I said, the answers aren't in some book, you know, they're in here, right? And Charles Fillmore said over and over again, he said, you know, this is the way I think it is, but I reserve the right to change my mind if another experience shows up that changes what it is that I'm doing. So it's a very fluid kind of experience. It's very personal, in a sense. So it's not that we have the, quote, the answer, but for me, it's the closest thing to being able to explain what I experience. And so that's how it shows up for me. It gives me a little bit of structure around what I am experiencing in my own life experience. And so when the wise men gave the gifts, they gave gifts that represented something. First they allowed Joseph and Mary to take Jesus and escape. Well, they escaped to Egypt. Now Egypt metaphysically represents the physical world, the sense consciousness, the outer experience. And so they escaped and hid within the context of the world. So here they have this new divine idea that has to be protected. They have to go someplace else in order to protect it. And that's the experience that shows up with us. When we awaken, there is a gestation time, a learning time, a time to allow that new idea to begin to mature in our consciousness. There has to be a space and time, and that space and time is going to have to occur in the context of the world in which we live, right? Because that's where we are. That's what our daily activities are. So we take that out into the world. And so the gold represents abundance. That it is the understanding that we live in an abundant universe. and that our needs will be provided for. That God is there and will, whatever it is that we need to do in order to bring the space to this new experience is going to be, there's going to be what we need to do that. There is abundance. The frankincense is the capacity, it represents the capacity to begin to see life through spiritual eyes. It's seeing the essence of life through our eyes. So that's a gift that we have, and when we awaken internally, we begin to see the world differently. We begin to see people differently. We become less judgmental. We become more interested in who people are. We are less prone to evaluate somebody. We are more interested in connecting with them. And so there's a lot of things that show up in our experience that are different. Sometimes we don't understand them ourselves. And so we fall back into old patterns, but then as we begin to again see through the eyes of spirit, our life changes. And we begin to evolve and develop. Myrrh represents that energy of love, and that the journey really is about love. And myrrh is a fragrance, and it brings love into our life experience. And so those are the things that it represents. Now, when I had my awakening, and I tried to convert everybody. I had my secretary in my office that I would get into these arguments with, right, all the time. She was a Lutheran, and it was like we'd get into this until one day I realized I was paying her salary and I better quit arguing with her so she could do her work. I decided that was wiser, and I backed off. But when I was in that process, I ended up going to Unity Village. So I pulled out of the world for a while, for 2 years, and allowed myself to be in an environment where there was total support, because there wasn't a lot of support in the world. That was part of my journey. Now, we all can't necessarily do that. So what's important in our journey is to find a place or an experience where we have spiritual support in our life, to find a community or a group of people or a network where we can get reminded and encouraged and receive support in terms of our journey and our growth, because we don't always get it in the world around us. We don't always get it in the context of our jobs or in other situations and circumstances in our life. Now, so we hide the Christ child in the world of ego, and we do that, which is our divine nature, and we do that by being a better listener than a speaker. That the way in which we can show up in the world, understanding our divine nature, is to show up as someone who listens. So when we show up as someone who listens, not trying to change others, then we don't threaten them, do we? We don't threaten Herod. We don't threaten the world. We simply listen. Now, it's interesting that my entire family that is alive today is involved in unity, right? I converted my entire family. The whole thing. I mean, everybody. We used to be Episcopalians. Now it's everybody's unity. That includes my brother, my sister, his kids, their spouses, their kids, my kids, and their kids. The whole group goes to unity. And I didn't do a single thing to cause that to happen. I never had one single theological discussion or argument or conversation with any of these people in my life. All I did was do what it is that I had come here to do, and that was to be a part of something. And they saw how that impacted my life, and they wanted to be a part of something. And little by little, over the years,